1944, France, Normandy. This is not just a place name. It's a wound. U.S. Army 29th Infantry Division, 116th Regiment. If you know even a little about World War II history, you know what that designation means. Omaha Beach, a morning straight out of hell. When the landing craft doors dropped, the first wave of soldiers didn't see France. They saw death. German machine guns poured fire down from the cliffs. Veterans have described that sound many times. It was like ripping through an entire bolt of linen, only denser, colder. Within 5 minutes, the seawater turned from gray to red. I'm not telling you this to dramatize the brutality of war. I'm telling you so you understand one thing. Once something is captured on film, it never truly disappears. My name is Ellis Cole, not a veteran, even though people tend to assume that when they hear my last name. I'm a night archivist for the 29th Division Historical Archive and head of its digital restoration department. It sounds respectable, but stripped down, I'm a guy who sits alone in a climate-controlled room 2 floors underground after everyone else has gone home, staring at stacks of nitrate film, brittle oxidized 16mm reels, and yellowed photographs. Try to use the most advanced AI technology available to pull images back into the world after time, heat, humidity, and war itself have tried to erase them. You might think that sounds cool. It's not. Not even a little. The archive is located in Petersburg, Virginia, about 3,000 miles from the actual battlefield. But every night when I open that 800-pound fire door, walk down a windowless stairwell, past rows of metal cabinets labeled classified, declassified, and finally sit down on my workstation, I'll tell you this, I am closer to hell than any living soldier. Not metaphorically. This started last month, second week of May. A rainy Tuesday. The tech department delivered a new AI workstation to me, excess capacity from some Department of Defense lab. It looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. 6 GPUs running in parallel, loaded with the latest Spectral Phantom visual restoration algorithm. It's been getting a lot of attention lately. Supposedly, it can predict missing information from incomplete video frames, even reconstruct high-precision facial features from a face reduced to just a handful of pixels. At its core, it's just deep learning. Engineers fed millions of images into its neural network. Faces, trees, vehicles, weapons, uniforms, buildings, teaching it what things are supposed to look like. When you give it damaged footage, it doesn't just preserve the noise and scratches. It uses its imagination to fill in what's missing. Sound intelligent, right? That's what I thought too. That night's routine job was restoring a nitrate reel labeled 29 IDF 0417. According to the archive, it was filmed in August 1944 near Saint-Lô, France, a village liberated by Allied forces. About 4 minutes long, shot by a war correspondent embedded with the troops. The film was in terrible condition. More than 60% of the frames showed chemical degradation. Branch-like silver mirroring patterns covered the image, and in some places it had carbonized into black pits. I loaded it into the scanner and let the AI begin its frame-by-frame analysis. The progress bar crept forward. 3%, 7%, 12%. That's usually when I make a cup of black coffee, lean back in my chair, and watch the old CRT surveillance monitors. The archive security system was installed in the 90s. 8 cameras covering every corner of the room, split across 4 14-inch displays. The layout of the archive is like this. You come down the stairs and directly ahead is a fire door leading into a main hall of about 400 square feet. All 4 walls are lined with compact shelving units holding tens of thousands of original records. My workstation sits in the center. 3 monitors side by side, keyboard, mouse, and a dedicated terminal for AI processing. To my left is an examination station with a stereo microscope and light box. To my right, a large flatbed scanner. 4 cameras are mounted in the corners of the main hall, with the other 4 covering the hallway and stairwell. That night, I was the only person in the archive. When I say the only person, that statement is going to get complicated very soon. So remember this, at that moment I believed and had every reason to believe that I was the only living person in the entire building. At 31%, the AI completed its first pre-processing pass. It displayed an initial restoration preview. The image was dark, typical nitrate film darkness, with that brownish tint. A rural dirt road ran through the frame, flanked by low stone walls, with collapsed houses behind them. Var. In the center of the frame, about 7 or 8 American soldiers were moving along the road. Their uniforms were standard, M1941 field jackets, gaiters, M1 helmets. 2 carried bazookas. 1 had an M1919 machine gun. A typical infantry patrol, probably post-liberation clearing or reconnaissance. Everything looked normal, or rather, everything looked abnormal in a way that normal things never end up being what keeps you awake at 3 in the morning. I noticed a detail. On the far left of the frame, between the stone wall and a blasted oak tree, there was a shadow. Not an obvious shadow, not human-shaped, not an object. More like a patch of light that couldn't penetrate, an area darker than the surrounding environment. In the original film, that region was completely obscured by silver mirroring. It just looked like a mass of white noise. But during restoration, the AI didn't fill it in as something logical, like a tree, a rock, or debris. It preserved it, and in its prediction model, it seemed to be trying to resolve it into a shape. I didn't think much of it at the time. AI visual restoration isn't magic. It produces hallucinations, cases where the neural network outputs what it thinks is most likely, without enough data to support it. It's common. Give an AI a blurry image of a cat, and it might give you a dog instead, because dogs appear more frequently in its training data. I assumed that's what this was. I started adjusting parameters, lowering the AI's creativity, increasing its adherence to the original data. It's a tedious process, lots of trial and error. I worked, sipped my coffee, listened to the low hum of the archive's HVAC system. That sound had been with me for 4 years. I barely noticed it anymore. But that night, for some reason, it stood out. It didn't sound like it was coming from the vents. It sounded like it was coming from inside the walls, from deep within the metal cabinets, from the paper and film that recorded death. I blamed it on fatigue. 1:43 a.m. I checked the time. Kept working. At 58%, the AI completed its second deep restoration pass. This time I selected military mode, a preset designed for battlefield footage. It prioritizes uniforms, weapons, and vehicles, reducing creative reconstruction in the background. The image sharpened significantly. Details emerged: the gravel on the road, tire tracks, a few spent shell casings. The soldiers' faces were still blurred. Nitrate film sensitivity was too low, and motion blur couldn't be fully corrected, but their gear, movements, even hints of expression were visible. And then I saw the shadow. It was still there, between the wall and the oak tree. But now the AI had rendered it more distinctly. It wasn't just a shape anymore. It was humanoid. No, not humanoid. I say that because it's the closest word we have. But it wasn't human-shaped. Let me try to explain. Its height was roughly the same as the soldiers, about 5'8". But the proportions were wrong. The shoulders were too wide, or maybe it didn't have shoulders at all. From the head downward, it was a continuous, slightly widening column, like someone wearing a massive cloak. But instead of a body underneath, there was something filling it. The head-to-body ratio was about 1:5. A normal adult is closer to 1:7. So the head looked too large. Or maybe it wasn't a head. Just something where a head should be. It had no features. The AI didn't generate eyes, a nose, or a mouth. Where a face should be, there was a smooth, slightly curved dark surface, like someone had pressed an egg onto the top of a pillar. It stood behind the stone wall, which meant its lower half was obscured. I couldn't tell if it had legs or how it was standing. I stared at the screen for about 30 seconds. Then I did what anyone in a technical field would do. I checked the parameters. I rolled back the restoration, reran the algorithm, switched prediction models. 5 times. 5 runs, each with different seeds and different versions. Every time, the AI gave me the same result. That thing was there. My first reaction wasn't fear. It was confusion. Pure professional confusion. My thought process was, is there something wrong with the training data? What dataset was this model trained on? Could it have included supernatural imagery, causing it to generate this kind of output? I even opened a browser window to look up the technical documentation. Then one of the monitors flickered. Not the restored footage, the surveillance feed. The 4 14-inch CRT screens in front of me displayed the 8 camera feeds. I glanced at them out of habit, That's what night workers do, checking their surroundings every few minutes, even though nothing ever changes. Stairwell, empty. Hallway, empty. Southeast corner, empty. Southwest corner, empty. Examination station, empty. Wait, I switched back to the southwest camera feed. It covered the area behind my workstation, angled roughly toward my back. In other words, if you stood where that camera was, you'd see me sitting at my desk from behind. On the screen, I was there, sitting in my chair, my back to the camera, coffee cup on my right, the glow of the monitors lighting the side of my face. Behind my chair, about 3 feet away, there was something. No, not something. There was nothing. On the screen, behind the chair, was just the floor. Gray concrete, with black rubber streaks from the chair's wheels. But in the fraction of a second it took me to register that image, my body reacted in a way I had never experienced before. Every hair on the back of my neck stood up, not one or two, all of them. Then a cold surge shot up from my tailbone, along my spine, to the back of my skull, like someone had driven an ice spike straight into my spinal cord. I don't know how to explain it. I didn't actually see anything wrong. There was nothing there. But my body knew. It knew before I could even form the thought. Something isn't right. I slowly turned my head. Behind my chair was the floor. Gray concrete. Black rubber streaks. Nothing else. I looked back at the monitor. Still the same, just the floor. Everything normal. But the cold didn't go away. It lingered at the back of my head, like an ice pack pressed against my scalp. I took 3 slow breaths. Told myself it was fatigue. A hallucination. Too much caffeine. Poor oxygen in the basement. I stood up, walked to the other end of the archive, opened a bottle of water, took a couple of sips. I even said, "You okay?" to the old water cooler with the out-of-order label. I talk to objects sometimes. It's a trick you learn when you work alone for too long. I went back to my seat, decided to ignore both the shadow and my body's reaction, and keep working. I'm a professional. I had a job to do. The restoration report for that reel was due next week. I refocused on the film. 81%. The AI was in its final rendering phase now, using the highest precision model. About 12 minutes to completion. I leaned back, closed my eyes, listened to the hum of the HVAC system. The hum changed. I don't know if you understand the idea of the shape of a sound. Some sounds have shape. They come from specific directions, reflect in patterns across space. The HVAC hum, after 4 years, had a shape. A uniform sphere spreading evenly from the ceiling vents across the entire room. No direction, no variation. But that night, the shape changed. It wasn't a sphere anymore. It became directional, coming from a specific point. From my left, the examination station. I opened my eyes and looked. The stereo microscope and light box sat there. The light box was off, its indicator dark. The microscope eyepieces pointed upward like 2 empty eyes. Everything normal. But the sound was definitely coming from that direction. And it wasn't just noise anymore. It had frequency, rhythm. It wasn't a hum. It was a voice. A very low voice. So low your ears could barely hear it, but your chest could feel it. Like someone had taken a human voice and dropped it down several octaves, turning it into something almost infrasonic. My chest cavity resonated. My teeth ached faintly. I stood up and walked over. Leaned in, put my ear close to the microscope arm. The sound didn't get louder. It wasn't coming from the microscope. It was there, floating somewhere around the station. And in that moment, I made a decision. One I still can't fully explain. I didn't run. Didn't call the police. Didn't call my supervisor. I went back to my workstation, picked up my phone, and started recording. 2:14 a.m. Ellis Cole. Archive room. I'm restoring film 29, IDF 0417. The AI has generated anomalous imagery. I am also experiencing physical anomalies. There is currently a low-frequency sound in the archive of unknown origin. I will continue observation. That's what I mean by switching modes. It wasn't bravery. It wasn't recklessness. It was something deeper, professional instinct. When your entire career is about documenting things before they disappear, your first impulse isn't to flee the anomaly. It's to record it, even if it's getting closer. Because it was getting closer. I knew it. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. The temperature in the archive was dropping. Not evenly like air conditioning, but locally, directionally. Like someone had opened a freezer door in front of you, except inside wasn't food. It was emptiness. I looked back at the monitors. This time, something had changed. The southeast camera, the one covering the entrance, showed the fire door. Closed. Concrete floor in front of it. And a shadow. Not the shadow of an object. There was no object. Just a patch of darkness on the floor, darker than everything around it. And its shape, it was identical to the figure I had seen in the restored film. The two wide shoulders. The oversized head. The smooth, featureless form. It stood in front of the fire door, facing toward my workstation. I stared at the screen. My thoughts stalled for about 2 seconds. Then training took over. I switched to the southwest camera, the one behind my workstation. On that screen, I was still sitting in my chair, my back to the camera, and behind me, 3 feet away, on the floor, the shadow. But that made no sense. The shadow wasn't behind me. It was at the door. The southwest camera shouldn't even be able to see the door. It's at the front of the room, outside its field of view. I zoomed in. Fire door. Floor. Shadow. The shadow was at the door, facing me. But the southwest camera covers behind the workstation. The southeast camera covers the entrance. There is no angle where both cameras should capture the same spot in front of the door. Unless it had moved. I looked up toward the fire door. Closed. Empty. Gray concrete floor. Black wheel marks. Nothing. I looked back down at the monitors. Southeast camera. The shadow at the door. Southwest camera. The shadow behind my chair. And in that moment, I understood. This thing wasn't moving through physical space. It was moving through the camera feeds. Or rather, it existed within the camera's field of view, but not within mine. It appeared on electronic sensors, but not on the human retina. The fear that realization triggered was far worse than seeing any monster, because it meant my eyes, my most reliable tool for understanding reality, were useless. Everything I saw could be wrong. The truth was hiding inside cold silicon sensors. I remembered something an old colleague once told me, Jack Harrison. He worked here for 33 years, saw the entire transition from film to digital. In his last week before retirement, over lunch, he said something strange. You know what's scariest about the archive, Ellis? Not the dead people in those old photos. It's the living ones. The dead are already dead. They don't change. But the living, you never know when they'll stop being human. At the time, I thought he was speaking metaphorically. He was a Vietnam veteran. He said things like that sometimes. Now I understood. He wasn't being metaphorical. I started the AI again, but not on that reel. I pulled another one at random from the shelf. Label 29 IDF 0892. Shot in July 1944 near Corentin, Normandy. Small-scale urban combat. Better condition, about 40% frame damage. I loaded it in. I fed the reel into the scanner and started the AI restoration. This time I didn't touch the settings. I just left it on the default balance mode. The progress bar moved quickly. 23%, 47, 69. The preview frames appeared one by one on the screen. A dirt road became gravel. Gravel became cobblestone. A village turned into a town. The uniforms shifted. U.S. Soldiers now wearing the screaming eagle patch of the 101st Airborne. Combat. A German silhouette in a window. Gunfire. An American soldier dropped onto the cobblestones, his M1 carbine spinning out of frame. Smoke. Another soldier rushed in, crouched, trying to drag him behind cover. Everything was normal, until the camera panned past a stone wall at the end of the street. Behind the wall stood a figure. No, not a person. That shape, the two wide shoulders, the oversized head, the smooth surface. It stood behind the wall, only its upper half visible. Its posture, if you could call it that, leaned slightly forward as if watching the battle in the street. Its head didn't turn, didn't tilt, didn't make any of the tiny movements a human observer would. It just faced the fight, completely still. In the restored footage, its outline was perfectly clear. Its surface had a strange texture. Not fabric, not metal, not skin. Something rare in digital imagery. It looked like defocused blur, but everything around it was razor sharp. So it wasn't out of focus. It was inherently blurred. Or maybe it existed in a blurred state inside a sharp world. I pulled 3 more reels at random. August 1944, near St. Lo. September 1944, Brest. April 1945, along the Elbe. Different dates, different locations, different cameramen. Same shape, sometimes behind a low wall, sometimes in the shadow of ruins, sometimes at the edge of a formation, sometimes in the no man's land between opposing forces. It never acted, never moved, never drew a single soldier's gaze. It just existed, watching, recording, like an archivist. The words surfaced in my mind, and half the blood in my body went cold. I stood up and started pacing. My thoughts unraveled. I began thinking things I shouldn't have been thinking. Those reels were shot in 1944. There was no AI then, no neural networks, no deep learning. So how did that shape exist in the original footage? Was it visible to the naked eye? Or did it exist only in the film emulsion, in some specific arrangement of silver halide grains? A form of hidden information that human vision couldn't resolve, but AI could extract? If it's the latter, what does that mean? It means that for 80 years, these reels have been watched by countless people. Archivists, historians, veterans, documentary filmmakers. And no one ever noticed anything, because it wasn't meant for human eyes. It was meant for something else. And now, by using AI to process these films, we are essentially simulating the vision of that something else. We're reviewing the past with a non-human perception system. And in doing so, we're seeing the inhabitants that were always there. At 3:12 a.m., I sent an email to my supervisor. I didn't mention anything supernatural, just the facts. During AI-based restoration of multiple World War II film reels, I observed a recurring anomalous visual pattern. Recommended recalibrating the algorithm and auditing the training dataset for systemic bias. The moment I hit send, I knew I was lying. Not to my supervisor, to myself. I wrapped everything in technical language, professional protocol, a neat, rational net to contain it all. A very effective defense mechanism. For the next 3 days, I functioned normally. Worked, slept, drank coffee, talked to coworkers. I even convinced myself it was just an algorithmic bug. On the 4th day, something changed. That afternoon, I was updating project status on the whiteboard in the archive. The board is mounted on the east wall, near the southeast fire door. As I wrote, I caught a glimpse of the door's frosted glass window out of the corner of my eye. You can't see clearly through it, just blurred shapes and light. The hallway outside is lit by a fluorescent fixture that's on 24/7, steady and constant. I saw a shadow. Not mine. My shadow was behind me. The overhead lighting would cast it onto the floor, not the glass. This was another one. 2 wide shoulders. Oversized head. I didn't turn around. I kept writing. My hand was shaking, but I kept writing. One word, then another. Sitrep. Anomaly. Location Archife. Southeast corner. Then I heard a sentence. Not through the air. Not from any device. It appeared directly in my mind. Like someone used my brain as a whiteboard and wrote a line across it. It wasn't English. Not German, French, or any language I know. But I understood it. You see me. In that moment, I made a choice. I chose not to believe it. I chose to tell myself this was hallucination, extreme fatigue, too much caffeine. I chose to believe I was rational, educated, trained. I wasn't going to be scared by a shadow. I turned around. The glass was empty. The hallway light steady. The floor marked with rubber streaks. Everything normal. I laughed. At the door. At myself. I laughed at how close I'd come to scaring myself into a heart attack over an algorithm glitch. I picked up the eraser and wiped the board clean. Turned back toward my workstation, ready to recheck parameters. Then I heard it. Not in my head. In the air. From deep within the archive. Behind the shelving units. Footsteps. No, not footsteps. A rhythmic, heavy impact. Like bare feet striking concrete. But each contact far too heavy for a normal human body. The frequency was low. Low enough that I could feel the floor vibrating faintly. I stood in the center of the room, motionless. The sound came from my left, behind the shelving rows. There are 3 rows of compact shelving in the archive, each about 20 feet long, with 3-foot aisles between them. The sound came from behind the farthest row. I started walking toward it. I don't know why. My brain was screaming at me to run, but my legs moved forward. This wasn't courage. It felt like control, like my body no longer belonged to me, like something else was guiding it along an invisible track. I reached the aisle between the 2nd and 3rd rows. At the end of the aisle is a wall. In that wall is a small door leading to the HVAC room. That door is always locked. The key is in my desk drawer. I have never opened it. The last time it was opened was in March, during system maintenance. I watched the technician lock it when he was done. I took the key back myself. The door was open, about 6 inches. Inside, pitch black. The low, heavy sound was coming from within. I stood at the threshold. My right hand reached, almost automatically, for the light switch on the wall. My fingers touched the plastic plate. I pressed it. Nothing. The sound stopped. Silence. Total silence. Even the HVAC hum was gone. The archive had never been this quiet. This wasn't just the absence of sound. It felt like the death of sound. Like someone had hit mute on the entire world. Then I smelled something. It wasn't a smell I can describe. Not rot. Not chemicals. Not burning. It was something entirely unfamiliar. Something my sense of smell had no label for. Like matter, crushed into powder at an impossibly low temperature, then released into the air, drifting into your lungs. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't nauseating. But my brain rejected it. My body rejected it, as if it didn't belong to the chemical structure of this world. I stepped back. 1 step, 2, 3. My back hit the metal handle of a shelving unit. The cold shock snapped something in me. I turned, and I walked. Then I ran. Through the aisles. Through the main hall. To my workstation. I grabbed my phone, my keys, bolted for the fire door, shoved it open, sprinted up the stairs, burst through the ground floor exit, and into the parking lot. 3:41 a.m. A crescent moon hung over the Virginia sky. I stood in the middle of the lot in a shirt and jeans. No jacket, no shoes. I don't remember when I lost them. The asphalt under my feet was numbingly cold. I sucked in air like a drowning man breaking the surface. I got into my car, locked the doors, started the engine, turned on every light, low beams, high beams, fog lights. I stared at the archive entrance. The door I just run through was still open, half ajar, fluorescent light spilling out from the hallway. 5 minutes later, it closed, not from wind. There was no wind that night. I took 3 days off, didn't answer calls, didn't reply to emails. Stayed in my apartment with the curtains drawn, TV volume maxed out, trying to drown out the memory of that low, heavy rhythm still echoing in my head. On the 4th day, I went back. Not because I was ready, because of an email from my supervisor. Other restoration specialists, using the same AI system, had reported similar anomalies. Different archives, different batches. Mandatory meetings scheduled for Monday. Subject: algorithmic hallucinations in AI visual restoration and quality control measures. Which meant I wasn't alone. At that meeting, I heard more. A technician from Maryland said that while restoring U.S. Navy footage from the Pacific Theater, the AI identified the same shape almost every reel. Not in the background, on the water, between waves, half submerged, or existing in a way no floating object should. A specialist from Texas said aerial reconnaissance photos from the Army Air Forces showed anomalous heat signatures on the ground. Same outline. Another from Ohio said footage from the Nuremberg trials contained it. In the courtroom, standing in the last row of the gallery, among lawyers, judges, reporters documenting the largest crimes in human history. That afternoon, I went back down to level B2. The fire door was closed. The hallway light steady. I opened it. The HVAC hum filled the space again. Everything normal. I sat at my workstation. 3 monitors. Keyboard. Mouse. AI terminal. 8 surveillance feeds. All empty. I opened the audio recording. 2:14 a.m. My own voice playback. 2:14 a.m. Ellis Cole. Archive room. Restoring film 29. IDF 0417. Listening to it felt distant. The voice was real. The experience it described, was that real? What does the word real even apply anymore? I closed the file, opened the AI software. No film loaded, just a live preview mode, a black screen with no input. I maxed the gain, cranked the contrast, pushed the AI's prediction strength to maximum. Noise appeared, random, meaningless digital noise. Then the system began to work, searching for patterns, for shapes it had learned from millions of images. Trying to create meaning out of nothing. A few seconds later, a form emerged. Blurry, incomplete, like something seen through dense fog, but becoming clearer. Too wide. Shoulders, oversized head, smooth surface, standing in black void. Facing me. I watched it for a long time. Then I reached out and pressed the physical switch on the side of the monitor. Darkness. Only the faint glow of the surveillance screens remained, and the endless, low hum of the air system. I sat there in the dark, thinking about what Jack Harrison said. You never know when they'll stop being human. I think I misunderstood him. Maybe he didn't mean people turn into monsters. Maybe he meant people were never just people. That inside each of us, deep within what we call the self, there's something that doesn't belong to this dimension. Something waiting for technology, waiting for perception to expand, waiting for the day someone builds a tool powerful enough to uncover it, buried deep in our collective memory. I never filed a restoration report for Real 29 ID F0417. I saved everything, the raw data, the AI output, my notes, onto an encrypted hard drive. It's in a safe in my apartment. I don't know why I kept it. Evidence. Warning. Or maybe because if I destroyed it, I'd have to admit that night was real. As long as it exists, I can still tell myself it was just a glitch, just an algorithm, just fatigue. But do you know what the worst part is? Not the shape, not the footsteps, not the voice in my head. The worst part is this. Every night since, I go home, open my laptop, and listen to oral histories from World War II veterans. Thousands of interviews, tens of thousands of recordings. And in them, I keep hearing the same word. Not English, French, Nombre, the shadow. They talk about it in Normandy hedgerows, in the Ardennes blizzards, in the mud of Hurtgen Forest. A shadow that belonged to no one. Didn't fight, didn't shout, didn't beg, just stood there, watching. Some called it an angel. Some called it death. Most chose not to think about it. We didn't talk about it. One veteran from the 82nd Airborne said in a 1998 interview, not because we were afraid, because we didn't have the words. And if you don't have the words, maybe it didn't happen. Now we have words. AI gave them to us. It pulled that shadow out of the blind spot of human language, gave it shape, defined its outline, showed us what it should look like. But here's the question. Is what AI sees the same thing we see? Or when we use AI to look into the past, are we discovering truth or creating it? I don't know. I only know this. That hard drive is still in my safe. And that small door to the HVAC room, the one that should always be locked, I check it every morning. Every single day. It's always locked. Always.